The dust-covered road leading into Cimarron, New Mexico territory, was empty except for the lone figure of Clayton Abernathy, who sat tall in his saddle as the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. His weathered face bore the marks of a man who had spent his 32 years fighting for everything he'd ever gotten, and the vast cattle ranch that sprawled in the valley below was testament to that struggle. But as the townsfolk were so quick to remind him lately, all his hard work meant nothing without someone to pass it on to when he was gone. It was 1875, and Clayton had spent the better part of a decade building the Diamond a ranch into one of the most successful operations in the territory. His cattle were the finest, his horses the strongest, and his reputation as a fair but formidable businessman was known throughout the Southwest. Yet the grand house he'd built stood mostly empty, with only his housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, and a rotating crew of cowboys to fill the silence. Clayton sighed, adjusting his worn Stetson as he guided his chestnut stallion down the hill toward town. The Cattlemen's Association meeting tonight was sure to bring another round of not-so-subtle hints about his bachelor status. He'd lost count of how many times Bartholomew Jenkins, the president of the association and father of 5, had tried to introduce him to eligible ladies passing through Cimarron. The main street was busy as Clayton rode in, tipping his hat to familiar faces. He tied his horse outside the Silver Dollar Saloon, where the monthly association meeting was held in the back room. As he pushed through the swinging doors, conversations quieted momentarily before resuming with renewed vigor. Clayton. "About time you showed up," called Bartholomew from his regular table. "Come have a drink, got someone I want you to meet." Clayton suppressed a groan. Another matchmaking attempt, no doubt. Still, he nodded politely and made his way across the saloon. "Evening, Bart," he said, sliding into an empty chair. "Who's this someone that couldn't wait until after the meeting?" Bartholomew's eyes twinkled. "No one today, but I've got news from Santa Fe. Judge Morrison's niece is arriving next month. Apparently she's a widow from back east looking for a fresh start. Educated, too." "And I suppose you've already told her all about me?" Clayton asked dryly. "Just that the territory's most eligible bachelor might be willing to show her around," Bartholomew replied with a grin. "Clayton, you can't keep putting this off. You've built something special out there at Diamond, eh? Don't you want someone to share it with? Don't you want children to inherit what you've worked so hard to build?" Clayton took a long swallow of whiskey. "I've got plenty of time, Bart. Do you? Look at Thomas Miller. Dropped dead last spring at 43, no warning, no goodbyes, and what happened to his spread, carved up and sold because he had no heir." The reminder of Thomas's fate struck a nerve. Clayton had purchased 200 acres of the former Miller property himself, knowing how the man would have hated seeing his life's work divided. "I understand your concern," Clayton said finally, "but I won't marry just to produce an heir. When I find a woman I can't live without, if I find her, then maybe." Bartholomew shook his head. "You're too romantic for your own good. Marriage is as much a practical arrangement as anything else." Before Clayton could respond, the saloon doors swung open and the room fell silent. Standing in the doorway was a woman unlike any Clayton had seen in Cimarron. She wore a simple but well-made traveling dress, her auburn hair partially covered by a modest hat. Even from across the room, her confident posture and direct gaze commanded attention. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice clear and steady despite the dozen pairs of eyes fixed on her. "I'm looking for Sheriff Wilson." One of the men at the bar pointed to a door at the back. "Office is through there, madam." She nodded her thanks and walked through the saloon with her head held high, ignoring the whispers that followed her. "Who was that?" Clayton asked, surprised by his own interest. Bartholomew shrugged. "New schoolteacher, maybe. Heard the town council finally hired someone." Clayton watched as she disappeared into the sheriff's office, a strange feeling settling in his chest. "Well," said Bartholomew, "as I was saying about Judge Morrison's niece—" "Excuse me," Clayton interrupted, standing suddenly. "I need to speak with the sheriff about those rustlers near the South Ridge." Ignoring Bartholomew's knowing smile, Clayton crossed the room and knocked on the sheriff's door. "Come in," called Sheriff Wilson's gruff voice. Clayton entered to find the sheriff seated behind his desk, the mysterious woman perched on a chair across from him. "Abernathy," the sheriff nodded. "What can I do for you?" Clayton fumbled for words, suddenly aware of how impulsive his actions had been. "I wanted to check if there had been any more trouble with those rustlers, but I can come back later." "No need," the woman said, rising to her feet. "Sheriff Wilson and I were just concluding our business." She extended her hand to Clayton. "Dahlia Sinclair." "I'm the new schoolteacher for Cimarron." Clayton took her hand, noting the firm handshake. "Clayton Abernathy, I own the Diamond, a ranch outside of town." "Mr. Abernathy is one of our most prominent citizens," Sheriff Wilson added. "His support helped fund the new schoolhouse." A flicker of genuine interest crossed Dahlia's face. "Then I'm indebted to your generosity, Mr. Abernathy. I was just asking the sheriff about suitable accommodations in town." "The boarding house is full up with railroad men," the sheriff explained. "And the hotel is hardly appropriate for a lady on her own," Clayton finished. He hesitated for just a moment before continuing. "Miss Sinclair, my ranch house has several unused guest rooms, and my housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, is beyond reproach as a chaperone. You'd be welcome to stay until more suitable arrangements can be made." Sheriff Wilson's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but Dahlia studied Clayton carefully. "That's very kind, Mr. Abernathy, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition at all. The Diamond is only a short ride from the schoolhouse, and I can arrange transportation for you each day." Dahlia seemed to weigh her options. "May I ask why you'd extend such generosity to a stranger?" Clayton smiled, appreciating her directness. "Education is important to the future of Cimarron. Besides, Mrs. Holloway would never forgive me if I let the new schoolteacher sleep on a cot in the sheriff's office." "I assure you, I wasn't planning on," Dahlia began, but a small smile played at her lips. "Just until proper accommodations become available," Clayton assured her. "No strings attached." After a moment's consideration, Dahlia nodded. "Very well, Mr. Abernathy, I accept your offer with gratitude." "Excellent. I'll have one of my men bring your luggage to the ranch." "Will you be ready to depart after I conclude my business here?" "I will," she said. "Thank you, Sheriff Wilson, for your assistance." As Dahlia left the office, Sheriff Wilson fixed Clayton with a knowing look. Well, well, Clayton Abernathy offering his home to a lady he just met. "Bartholomew will have a field day with this," Clayton frowned. "It's a simple courtesy, nothing more, if you say so," the sheriff replied, not bothering to hide his amusement. "Now, what's this about rustlers?" An hour later, Clayton helped Dahlia into his wagon. Her trunks were secured in the back, and the setting sun cast long shadows as they headed out of town. "I must admit, Mr. Abernathy, your offer surprised me," Dahlia said as they left the town behind. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're the new schoolteacher, which means the town council vetted you thoroughly. That's good enough for me," Clayton replied. "Besides, Mrs. Holloway has been complaining about having no one to talk to except cowboys and cattle." "And what about you? Don't you provide conversation?" Clayton laughed. "According to Mrs. Holloway, I'm as talkative as a fence post unless I'm giving orders or negotiating cattle prices." "I find that hard to believe," Dahlia said with a small smile. "You seem quite articulate to me." "Perhaps you inspire better conversation than most," Clayton replied, surprised by his own boldness. As they crested a hill, the full expanse of the Diamond came into view. The main house stood proudly in the distance, a two-story structure built of sturdy timber with a wide wraparound porch. Nearby were a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings that formed the heart of the ranch operation. "It's beautiful," Dahlia breathed, taking in the vista. "Thank you. It's been a labor of love these past 10 years. You built all this yourself," Clayton nodded. "Started with 50 acres and a dream. Now it's over 2,000 acres with the best breeding stock in the territory." "That's impressive," Dahlia said sincerely. "You must be very proud." "I am," Clayton agreed. "Though lately, everyone seems more concerned with who will inherit it than what I've accomplished." "Ah, the heir question," Dahlia said knowingly. "I'm familiar with that pressure." Clayton glanced at her, curious. You mentioned you're a widow, a shadow crossed Dahlia's face. Yes. My husband died 3 years ago in a factory accident in Boston. We had been married for 2 years. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, she said quietly. Coming west was my way of starting fresh. Teaching has always been my passion, but in Boston I was forever poor Mrs. Sinclair, the childless widow. The honesty of her admissions struck Clayton. People can be thoughtless in their judgments. Indeed, and what of you, Mr. Abernathy? Have you never been married? No, Clayton answered. Never found the time or perhaps the right person. The ranch has always been my priority. And now everyone thinks you need an heir, Dahlia concluded. Precisely. The Cattlemen's Association has practically made it their mission to see me wed and breeding within the year. Dahlia laughed, the sound bright in the gathering dusk. How very considerate of them. Isn't it just? Clayton smiled, finding her laughter infectious. They had reached the main house and lights glowed warmly in the windows. Mrs. Holloway, a stout woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, appeared on the porch as Clayton brought the wagon to a halt. Mr. Abernathy, we weren't expecting you back so soon, and with company no less. Her eyes widened as she took in Dahlia. Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss Dahlia Sinclair, Cimarron's new schoolteacher. She'll be staying with us temporarily until proper accommodations can be arranged in town. Miss Sinclair, this is Mrs. Holloway, the true ruler of Diamond A. Mrs. Holloway smiled warmly. Welcome, Miss Sinclair. It'll be a pleasure to have another woman about the place. These cowboys don't appreciate good conversation or clean floors. Thank you for your welcome, Mrs. Holloway, Dahlia replied. I promise not to be a burden. Nonsense, having you here will be a delight. Come inside, and I'll show you to your room while the men bring in your trunks. As Mrs. Holloway ushered Dahlia inside, Clayton signaled to one of the ranch hands to help with the luggage. He found himself watching Dahlia as she climbed the porch steps, struck by how naturally she seemed to fit into the scene. Boss, the ranch hand, young Jimmy Parker, interrupted Clayton's thoughts. Where should we put the ladies' things? The blue room, I think, Clayton replied. It has the best view of the sunrise. Jimmy nodded and began unloading the trunks, but not before giving Clayton a curious look. Later that evening, after Dahlia had retired to her room, Clayton sat in his study with a glass of whiskey. Mrs. Holloway bustled in with a fresh pot of coffee. That Miss Sinclair is a breath of fresh air, she announced as she set the pot down. Educated, well-mannered, and not afraid to speak her mind, we had quite the conversation over dinner while you were checking on that new calf. I'm glad you approve, Clayton said, hiding his smile behind his glass. More than approve, I haven't enjoyed a dinner conversation so much in years. Mrs. Holloway paused, fixing Clayton with a pointed look. She'd make someone a fine wife, Clayton sighed. Not you too, Mrs. Holloway. The woman just arrived, fresh from her journey, and you're already planning weddings. I didn't say anything about weddings, Mrs. Holloway replied innocently, just making an observation. Well, observe somewhere else. Miss Sinclair is our guest, not a potential broodmare, Mrs. Holloway sniffed. Such language. All I'm saying is that life has a funny way of bringing the right people together at the right time. Judge Holloway and I met when his horse threw a shoe outside my father's store. Sometimes coincidence is fate knocking. And sometimes it's just coincidence, Clayton countered. Besides, Miss Sinclair has come to Cimarron to teach, not to find a husband. Perhaps, but a woman can do both, you know. With that parting shot, Mrs. Holloway left the study. Clayton stared into his whiskey, thinking about Dahlia Sinclair. There was something compelling about her, an intelligence in her eyes and a quiet strength in her bearing that intrigued him. But he reminded himself that she was his guest, nothing more. The last thing she needed was another man making presumptions about her future. Still, as he finally retired to bed, Clayton found himself thinking that having Dahlia in his home felt strangely right, as if she belonged there. It was a dangerous thought for a man who had always valued his independence, but one he couldn't quite dismiss as he drifted off to sleep. The following morning, Clayton woke at dawn as usual. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs, surprised to find Dahlia already in the kitchen helping Mrs. Holloway, prepare breakfast. Good morning, Mr. Abernathy, Dahlia greeted him, a light flush coloring her cheeks. She wore a simple blue dress with her hair neatly braided and pinned up. I hope you don't mind my invading your kitchen. I can't abide sitting idle. Not at all, Clayton replied, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Holloway. Though you're a guest here, not expected to work. Teaching doesn't start for another week, and I've always believed in earning my keep, Dahlia explained. Besides, Mrs. Holloway has been telling me all about the ranch. It sounds fascinating. It keeps me busy, Clayton acknowledged. I'm riding out to check the north pasture today. Would you like to come along? I could show you the countryside, help you get your bearings in the territory. Dahlia's eyes lit up. I'd like that very much if it's no trouble. No trouble at all. Do you ride? Yes, though it's been some time. My father insisted all his daughters learn. You have sisters? Clayton asked, realizing how little he knew about her. Two, both married with children back east. A hint of sadness crossed Dahlia's face. We haven't been close since my husband's death. They didn't approve of my decision to come west. Their loss is Cimarron's gain, Clayton said, earning a grateful smile from Dahlia. After breakfast, Clayton led Dahlia to the stable where his foreman, Lucas Morgan, was already saddling horses. Miss Sinclair, this is Lucas. He keeps the ranch running when I'm otherwise occupied. Lucas, a weathered man in his 40s with a graying beard, tipped his hat. Madam, pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Holloway says you're the new schoolteacher. That's right, Dahlia confirmed. Though school won't begin until next Monday. Got a couple of my nephews who will be in your class, Lucas said. Good boys, but wild as March hares. Don't let them give you any trouble. I appreciate the warning, Mr. Morgan, Dahlia replied with a smile. Lucas led out a gentle mare for Dahlia. This here's Penny, sweetest horse on the ranch, but she's got spirit when she needs it. Clayton helped Dahlia mount, acutely aware of her slender waist as he lifted her into the saddle. She adjusted her riding skirt with practiced ease, seeming perfectly at home on horseback. Ready? Clayton asked, swinging onto his own stallion. Lead on, Mr. Abernathy, Dahlia replied with a bright smile. They rode out through the ranch yard, past cowboys already at work, and headed north toward the rolling grasslands. The morning was perfect clear skies, a gentle breeze, and the scent of sage in the air. It's beautiful here, Dahlia observed as they crested a hill overlooking a vast meadow dotted with grazing cattle. So different from Boston. Do you miss the city? Clayton asked. Dahlia considered the question. I miss certain comforts and conveniences, the libraries, the theaters. But there's something liberating about all this open space. It feels like room to breathe, to become whoever you want to be. That's exactly what drew me here, Clayton admitted. Back east, a man is judged by his family name and connections. Here, it's what you build with your own two hands that matters. And you've built something remarkable, Dahlia said, gesturing to the sprawling ranch around them. Though I understand now why everyone is so concerned about its future. It would be a shame for all this to be lost or divided after you're gone, Clayton sighed. That's the practical view, certainly, but marriage should be about more than securing property or producing heirs. You're a romantic, Mr. Abernathy, Dahlia observed with a small smile. Perhaps. Or just stubborn. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, checking cattle and mending a section of fence that had come loose. Clayton was impressed by Dahlia's willingness to help, holding tools and even hammering a few nails herself, despite her fine clothes. You're not what I expected in a schoolteacher, Clayton remarked as they rested in the shade of a large cottonwood tree, sharing the lunch Mrs. Holloway had packed. No, what did you expect? A stern old maid with a ruler ready to smack knuckles? Dahlia teased. Clayton laughed. Something like that, I suppose. Certainly not someone who can ride a horse and swing a hammer. My father was a professor, but he believed in practical education alongside academics. He taught all of us to ride, shoot, and fix things. Dahlia's expression grew wistful. He would have loved this country. Is he still living? Dahlia shook her head. No, he passed away 6 years ago. My mother followed a year later. I'm sorry. I lost my parents' young father to a mining accident when I was 12, mother to fever 2 years later. My uncle raised me, taught me ranching. It shapes you, doesn't it? Loss at a young age, it does, Clayton agreed. Makes you determined to build something lasting. They gazed out over the land together, a shared understanding passing between them. The moment felt intimate in a way Clayton hadn't experienced before, not romantic exactly, but a connection that went deeper than mere conversation. As the afternoon waned, they began the ride back to the ranch house. Crossing a small stream, Penny suddenly shied at a snake slithering through the grass. Dahlia maintained her seat admirably, but her hat went flying into the water. "Oh," she exclaimed, watching as her hat floated downstream. Without hesitation, Clayton dismounted and waded into the shallow stream, retrieving the sodden hat. "I'm afraid it's rather the worse for wear," he said, holding up the dripping accessory. Dahlia laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made Clayton's heart skip a beat. "I believe it's seen its last days as fashionable headwear." Clayton found himself laughing too, standing knee-deep in the stream with a ruined hat in his hands. "Mrs. Holloway is quite handy with a needle. Perhaps she can resurrect it. Or perhaps it's a sign I should embrace the Western style," Dahlia suggested. "Do you think I could carry off a Stetson like yours?" The image of Dahlia in a cowboy hat made Clayton smile. "I think you could carry off anything you chose to wear, Miss Sinclair." A blush colored Dahlia's cheeks at the compliment. "You're too kind, Mr. Abernathy." "Clayton," he said impulsively. "Please call me Clayton." Dahlia's blush deepened, but she nodded. "Then you must call me Dahlia." The exchange felt significant somehow, a small but important shift in their relationship. Clayton climbed back onto his horse, still holding the dripping hat, and they continued toward home with a new awareness between them. When they arrived back at the ranch, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues. Mrs. Holloway met them on the porch, her eyebrows rising at the sight of Dahlia's missing hat and wind-blown hair. "We had a small adventure with a snake and a stream," Clayton explained, holding up the ruined hat. Mrs. Holloway clicked her tongue. "Well, come inside, both of you. Dinner's almost ready and you look like you could use some hot coffee." As they entered the house, Clayton noticed several of his cowboys watching from the bunkhouse porch, their expressions curious. No doubt gossip was already spreading about the boss and the new schoolteacher. In a small community like Cimarron, such talk was inevitable. Over dinner, Dahlia regaled Mrs. Holloway with tales of their day, her eyes bright with excitement. Clayton found himself watching her more than participating, struck by how alive she seemed, how at ease in his home. "You'll need proper riding clothes if you're to be gallivanting about the countryside," Mrs. Holloway declared. "I have some material that would make a fine riding skirt, much more practical than what you're wearing now." "That's very kind, Mrs. Holloway, but I couldn't impose nonsense. It'll give me something useful to do in the evenings. Besides, a schoolteacher should be properly outfitted for the territory." Clayton smiled at Mrs. Holloway's transparent matchmaking. The older woman had taken to Dahlia immediately, and he suspected the offer of sewing had as much to do with keeping Dahlia at Diamond as with practical clothing concerns. Later, as Dahlia excused herself to retire for the night, she paused by Clayton's chair. "Thank you for today, it was illuminating." "The pleasure was mine," Clayton replied sincerely. "Perhaps we could ride to town tomorrow. You should see the schoolhouse before classes begin." "I'd like that very much," Dahlia said, her smile warm. "Good night, Clayton. Good night, Dahlia." As she climbed the stairs, Clayton became aware of Mrs. Holloway watching him with undisguised interest. "Not a word," he warned her. "I didn't say anything," she replied innocently. "Though if I were to speak, I might mention that I haven't seen you smile so much in years." Clayton shook his head, but couldn't deny the truth of her observation. Something about Dahlia Sinclair had gotten under his skin in a way no woman ever had before. The next morning, Clayton and Dahlia rode into Cimarron. The small schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple white building with a bell tower. Pride swelled in Clayton's chest as he watched Dahlia's face light up at the sight of it. "It's perfect," she declared as they dismounted and tied their horses to the hitching post. "It's not much," Clayton said, unlocking the door with the key Sheriff Wilson had entrusted to him. But the town council did its best with limited funds. Inside, the one-room schoolhouse was clean and well-built, with rows of simple desks facing a teacher's desk and blackboard. Shelves lined the back wall, mostly empty except for a few donated books. "We're still working on building up the school library," Clayton explained. "Books are expensive to ship out here." "I brought as many as I could," Dahlia said, running her fingers along the teacher's desk. "But you're right, it's a challenge. How many students are expected?" 23, ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Dahlia's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "It will be a challenge teaching so many different levels at once, but I've done it before in a small school outside Boston." "If anyone can manage it, I believe you can," Clayton said sincerely. Dahlia turned to him, a question in her eyes. "Why did you help fund this schoolhouse, Clayton? Most ranchers I've met seem to value practical skills over book learning." Clayton leaned against a desk, considering his answer. "I was fortunate enough to receive an education before my parents died. My father insisted on it, even though he was a working man himself. That education has served me well in building this ranch, not just the practical knowledge, but the ability to think critically, to see beyond the immediate challenge." He gestured to the room around them. "Every child in Cimarron deserves that same opportunity, regardless of their circumstances. Education opens doors that might otherwise remain closed." Dahlia studied him with new appreciation. "That's remarkably progressive thinking for a cattle rancher," Clayton smiled. "Don't tell the Cattlemen's Association, they already think I'm odd for reading Shakespeare in the evenings." "Your secret is safe with me," Dahlia promised, her eyes twinkling. "Though I must say you continue to surprise me, Mr. Abernathy." "Is that a good thing?" "A very good thing," she confirmed, her smile making his heart race. Their tour of the schoolhouse complete, they walked down Cimarron's Main Street. Clayton introduced Dahlia to various townspeople, all of whom greeted the new schoolteacher warmly. At the general store, Mr. Peterson insisted on giving Dahlia a small welcome gift, a lovely fountain pen for her teaching duties. "The community seems very supportive," Dahlia observed as they left the store. "They've been waiting for a proper teacher for almost 2 years, Clayton explained. "The last one only lasted 3 months before returning east, complaining about the savage conditions." "Well, I find nothing savage about Cimarron," Dahlia declared. "Different, certainly, but in the most invigorating way." They were about to head to the cafe for lunch when a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of men had gathered outside the bank, their voices raised in argument. "Stay here," Clayton instructed, moving toward the disturbance. Dahlia, predictably, ignored his directive and followed close behind him. As they approached, Clayton recognized Bartholomew Jenkins in heated discussion with Arthur Fleming, the bank manager. Several other members of the Cattlemen's Association stood nearby, looking concerned. "What's going on, Bart?" Clayton asked, joining the group. Bartholomew turned, his face flushed with anger. "Clayton, good timing. Fleming here is telling us the bank's calling in loans early, says orders came from the main office in Denver." Arthur Fleming, a thin man with spectacles, looked uncomfortable. "It's not my decision, gentlemen. The bank is adjusting its lending practices throughout the territory." "Adjusting?" snorted another rancher, "more like strangling." "How am I supposed to repay my cattle loan 3 months early with prices the way they are?" Clayton frowned. "This affects everyone with outstanding loans." "I'm afraid so, Mr. Abernathy," Fleming confirmed, "though I understand your accounts are in good standing." "They are, but this will hurt a lot of good men," Clayton said, thinking of the smaller ranchers who operated on tight margins. "When was this decision made?" "The directive arrived from Denver yesterday," Fleming explained. "I'm just the messenger." "A convenient messenger," Bartholomew growled. "Right after you bought that parcel of land outside town that Jenkins Cattle Company was eyeing," Fleming paled. "That was a private transaction unrelated to bank business." Clayton held up a hand. "Let's not make accusations without proof, Bart, but Mr. Fleming, you must see how this looks. Many of these men will lose their ranches if forced to repay early." "I sympathize, truly," Fleming insisted, "but I don't have the authority to change bank policy." Then who does? Dahlia suddenly spoke up from beside Clayton, all eyes turned to her in surprise. I beg your pardon, miss, but this is men's business, one of the ranchers said dismissively. Financial matters affect the entire community, Dahlia replied calmly. Including the school, if ranchers lose their livelihoods, their children may be forced to work rather than attend classes. Clayton felt a surge of admiration for her quick thinking and courage in speaking up. The lady has a point, he said. Mr. Fleming, who in Denver makes these decisions? Fleming hesitated. The bank's board of directors, Mr. Harrington is the chairman. Then perhaps a delegation should travel to Denver to discuss this directly with Mr. Harrington, Clayton suggested. Present our case as a community, not just as individual ranchers. That could work, Bartholomew agreed slowly. Harrington's a businessman. He might listen to reason if we show him how this hurts not just us but the bank's long-term interests in the territory. Exactly, Clayton nodded. A mass default benefits no one. Better to maintain relationships with reliable borrowers who need a little flexibility. The tension in the group eased as the men considered this approach. Plans were made for Bartholomew and two others to travel to Denver the following week. As the crowd dispersed, Fleming approached Clayton privately. Thank you for calming things down, Mr. Abernathy. I was afraid it might turn ugly. Don't thank me yet, Clayton warned. If Harrington refuses to reconsider, you'll have a real problem on your hands. Walking back toward their horses with Dahlia, Clayton noticed her thoughtful expression. That was brave of you to speak up. It seemed important, she said simply. In my experience, sometimes people in positions of authority need to be reminded of the human cost of their decisions. You handled yourself well. Not many would have the courage to insert themselves into such a discussion. Dahlia smiled. My father always said that education without action is merely entertainment. If I'm to be part of this community, I should contribute where I can. Cimarron is fortunate to have you, Clayton said sincerely. They reached their horses and Clayton helped Dahlia mount. As they rode back toward Diamond A, he found himself contemplating how naturally she had stepped into a role of community advocacy. Most new arrivals would have kept their heads down, focused solely on their own affairs until they'd established themselves. Dahlia's willingness to engage immediately spoke volumes about her character. Over the next few days, a routine developed at Diamond A. Dahlia spent mornings preparing for the upcoming school term, reviewing her teaching materials and organizing lessons. Afternoons often found her riding with Clayton, learning the territory and helping with light ranch work. Evenings were spent in the comfortable parlor, where Dahlia would read aloud from one of Clayton's books, while Mrs. Holloway worked on the promised riding skirt. 4 days after their visit to town, Mrs. Holloway presented Dahlia with the finished garment, a practical split skirt of sturdy brown fabric that would allow comfortable riding while maintaining modesty. It's perfect, Dahlia declared, holding it up admiringly. I can't thank you enough, Mrs. Holloway. You can thank me by wearing it on your ride today, the housekeeper replied with satisfaction. Mr. Abernathy is planning to show you the West Ridge, I believe. Clayton, entering the room in time to hear this, smiled at Dahlia's delight. The view from the ridge is spectacular. On a clear day like today, you can see for miles. I'll change right away, Dahlia promised, hurrying upstairs with her new riding skirt. When she returned, Clayton had to catch his breath. The practical garment suited her perfectly, highlighting her slender figure while allowing freedom of movement. With her hair braided and a borrowed hat from Mrs. Holloway, she looked every inch a Western woman. How do I look? She asked, giving a small twirl. Like you belong here, Clayton answered honestly, then flushed at his own boldness. Mrs. Holloway's knowing smile didn't help matters as she shooed them out the door. Off with you both, and don't rush back. I'm making a special supper that needs plenty of time. The ride to the West Ridge was pleasant, with Dahlia growing more confident on horseback each day. They talked easily about books they'd read, places they'd seen, and their hopes for the future. Clayton found himself sharing thoughts and dreams he'd never voiced to anyone, and Dahlia seemed equally open. I always wanted children, she admitted as they rested their horses atop the ridge, gazing out at the stunning panorama of mountains and valleys. It was the greatest disappointment of my marriage that we never conceived before William's death. Clayton watched her profile as she looked out over the land. You would make a wonderful mother. Perhaps someday, she said softly. Though at 26, I sometimes fear that chance has passed me by. 26 is young, Clayton assured her. Especially out here where people often marry later than back east. Dahlia turned to him, her expression vulnerable. And what about you? Do you want children of your own? Clayton considered the question seriously. I've always imagined passing Diamanda to a son or daughter someday, teaching them everything I know, watching them grow into it. He smiled ruefully. Though as everyone in Cimarron regularly reminds me, that requires finding a wife first. The right wife, Dahlia corrected gently. As you said, marriage should be about more than producing heirs. Their eyes held for a long moment, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Clayton felt an impulse to reach for her hand but resisted, uncertain if such a gesture would be welcome. The moment was broken by the distant sound of a gunshot, followed by several more in quick succession. That's coming from the north pasture, Clayton said, instantly alert. Something's wrong. Without hesitation, they spurred their horses down the ridge, riding hard toward the sound. As they crested a hill overlooking the pasture, Clayton saw several of his men engaged in a firefight with mounted intruders who were attempting to drive off a small herd of cattle. Rustlers, Clayton muttered. Stay back, Dahlia, this is dangerous. But Dahlia was already reaching for the rifle in Clayton's saddle scabbard. I told you my father taught me to shoot, she said, checking that the weapon was loaded. I can provide covering fire while you help your men. Clayton hesitated only briefly before nodding. Stay behind that outcropping. If things go badly, ride straight back to the ranch and tell Lucas what's happened. Be careful, Dahlia urged, positioning herself behind the rocks with the rifle ready. Clayton drew his revolver and galloped down the hill toward his men, who were outnumbered 5-3. At his approach, one of the rustlers turned and fired, the bullet whistling past Clayton's ear. A shot rang out from the hill, and the rustler who had fired at Clayton clutched his arm, dropping his gun. Dahlia's aim had been true. With the advantage now more even, Clayton and his cowboys pressed forward. 2 more shots from Dahlia's position further disrupted the rustlers' efforts, forcing them to abandon the cattle and focus on defending themselves. Realizing they were outmatched, the rustlers finally broke and fled, galloping away toward the territorial border. Clayton was tempted to pursue them, but knew it was more important to secure the cattle and check on his injured men. One cowboy, young Billy Thompson, had taken a bullet in the shoulder. Another had a graze along his ribs. Clayton was helping bind their wounds when Dahlia approached, rifle still in hand. Is everyone all right? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Thanks to you, yes, Clayton replied. That was some fine shooting, Miss Sinclair, Billy exclaimed in surprise. That was you firing from the hill, Dahlia nodded, handing the rifle back to Clayton. My father believed women should know how to defend themselves and their homes. The cowboys exchanged impressed glances. Word of the new schoolteacher's unexpected skills would spread quickly through the bunkhouse tonight. We need to get Billy back to the ranch, Clayton decided. Pete, can you ride with that graze, or do you need help? I can manage, boss, Pete assured him, though his face was pale beneath his tan. Dahlia, would you help me with Billy? He shouldn't ride alone with that shoulder. Together, they helped Billy onto his horse, with Clayton mounting behind him to keep him steady. Dahlia gathered the reins of Clayton's horse and led it as they made their way back to the ranch at a careful pace. At the ranch, Mrs. Holloway took charge of the wounded men, her practical nursing skills coming to the fore. Clayton sent a rider to fetch the doctor from town, while Dahlia assisted Mrs. Holloway in cleaning and bandaging the injuries. You're good at this, Mrs. Holloway observed as Dahlia calmly helped hold Billy still while the housekeeper extracted the bullet from his shoulder. Steady hands. I volunteered at a hospital in Boston for a time, Dahlia explained. After William died, I needed something to occupy my mind. Later, with the injured men settled and the doctor on his way, Clayton found Dahlia on the porch, watching the sunset. Her hands, scrubbed clean of blood, trembled slightly as she gripped the railing. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, coming to stand beside her. "Yes," she said, though her voice wavered. "It's just, the reality of danger out here hit home today. Those men could have killed you." "But they didn't," Clayton assured her. "Thanks in large part to you." Dahlia shook her head. "I've never shot at a person before. Target practice is one thing, but knowing I actually hit someone." Clayton placed a hand over hers on the railing. "You protected my men, protected me. Those rustlers would have thought nothing of killing us all to steal the cattle." "I know," Dahlia sighed, "and I'd do it again if necessary. It's just unsettling." They stood in silence for a moment, Clayton's hand still covering hers. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and sincere. "You're an extraordinary woman, Dahlia Sinclair." She turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "Am I, or just someone doing what needed to be done?" "Both, perhaps," Clayton smiled, "but few would have shown your courage and composure today." Their eyes held, and Clayton felt the air between them change, charged with unspoken feelings. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward, their lips met in a gentle kiss, tentative at first, then with growing certainty. Dahlia's hands came up to rest on his chest, and Clayton's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Clayton rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the day you arrived," he admitted. "I've been hoping you would," Dahlia confessed with a shy smile. The sound of approaching hooves broke the moment. Clayton reluctantly stepped back as Dr. Anderson rode into the yard, medical bag in hand. "Rustlers, I hear," the doctor called as he dismounted. "Where are my patients?" "Inside, Doc," Clayton replied. "Mrs. Holloway's looking after them." As the doctor headed inside, Clayton turned back to Dahlia. "We should talk about this," he said, gesturing between them. Dahlia nodded, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Yes, we should, but not now. Your men need you, and the doctor will want to speak with you." "Tonight, then. After dinner, tonight," Dahlia agreed. The evening seemed interminable as Clayton checked on his injured men, discussed the rustler situation with his foreman, and made plans for increased patrols along the north boundary. Through it all, his mind kept returning to that kiss on the porch and the conversation that awaited him. Finally, with the ranch quiet and the doctor departed after treating the wounded cowboys, Clayton found himself alone with Dahlia in the parlor. Mrs. Holloway had retired early, a suspicious development that suggested she was giving them privacy. "Your men will recover well," Dahlia said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. The doctor seemed pleased with Mrs. Holloway's initial treatment. "She's had plenty of practice over the years," Clayton replied, settling into the chair across from Dahlia. "Ranch work isn't without its hazards." Another silence descended, this one more awkward as they both avoided the topic that hung between them. Finally, Clayton spoke. "Dahlia, about what happened on the porch." "Yes," she prompted. When he hesitated, Clayton took a deep breath. "I don't want you to think it was impulsive or thoughtless. The truth is, I've felt drawn to you since the moment we met. These past days, getting to know you, seeing your courage and intelligence and kindness, it's only deepened those feelings." Dahlia's eyes softened. "I've felt it too, Clayton. From that first night when you offered your home to a stranger, you're not what I expected to find in Cimarron." "What did you expect?" "I'm not sure," she admitted with a small smile. "But certainly not a Shakespeare-reading cattle rancher who values education and treats a schoolteacher as an equal." Clayton moved from his chair to sit beside her on the small sofa. "I know it's fast, too fast, perhaps. You've only been here a week, but I can't deny what I feel." Dahlia turned to face him more fully. In Boston, a courtship would take months with formal calls and chaperoned outings, but here, everything seems more immediate, more vital somehow. "Life in the West has a way of stripping away pretense," Clayton agreed. "When danger can arrive at any moment, be it rustlers or blizzards or drought, people learn to speak their minds and follow their hearts." "And what is your heart telling you, Clayton Abernathy?" Dahlia asked softly. Clayton took her hands in his. "That I'm falling in love with you, Dahlia Sinclair." "That I want to court you properly if you'll allow it." Dahlia's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I would like that very much," she whispered. "Though what will the town say, the schoolteacher living with her suitor?" "They'll talk, certainly," Clayton acknowledged, "but we can manage the proprieties. Perhaps you could move to town now that school is starting. Mrs. Wilson, the sheriff's wife, has a spare room she sometimes rents." "That seems wise," Dahlia agreed, though she looked reluctant, "as much as I've come to love it here at Diamond A." "You'll still be welcome here anytime," Clayton assured her, "and I'll call on you in town, bring you out for Sunday dinners." "A proper courtship," Dahlia smiled. "Though I suspect nothing about us will ever be entirely conventional," Clayton laughed softly. "Probably not. Does that concern you?" "Not in the least," Dahlia replied, leaning forward to place a gentle kiss on his lips. The following Monday, Cimarron's school officially opened with Dahlia presiding as teacher. She had moved into Mrs. Wilson's spare room the day before, with Clayton helping transport her trunks. The arrangement was proper, but allowed them to continue seeing each other regularly. Word of Dahlia's marksmanship during the Rustler incident had spread throughout the community, earning her the respect of the ranch families whose children would be in her classroom. Several mothers had called at Mrs. Wilson's home to welcome her properly to town, bringing small gifts and barely concealed curiosity about her relationship with Clayton Abernathy. Dahlia handled their inquiries with grace, acknowledging that she and Clayton were courting but emphasizing her commitment to her teaching duties. Most seemed satisfied with this, though a few of the more conservative townspeople raised eyebrows at the rapid development of the romance. Clayton called at Mrs. Wilson's home that evening after school, bringing a small bouquet of wildflowers he'd gathered himself. Mrs. Wilson, a friendly woman in her early 50s, invited him in with obvious approval. "Miss Sinclair is just freshening up," she informed him, leading him to the parlor. "How did the meeting with Sheriff Wilson go?" "Productive," Clayton replied. "We're organizing regular patrols between the ranches to deter more rustling attempts." "Good," Mrs. Wilson nodded. "Those thieves are getting bolder every year." Dahlia appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up at the sight of Clayton. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders in a way Clayton had never seen before. He stood immediately, finding himself momentarily speechless. "Good evening, Clayton," she greeted him, a touch of color in her cheeks at his evident admiration. "Dahlia," he managed, offering the wildflowers. "These aren't much compared to what you'd find in Boston, but—" "They're perfect," she assured him, accepting the bouquet with evident delight. "Let me put them in water." As she left to find a vase, Mrs. Wilson gave Clayton an approving nod. "You've made quite an impression on our new teacher, Mr. Abernathy. I haven't seen her stop smiling since she arrived." "She's made quite an impression on me as well," Clayton admitted. "So I've noticed," Mrs. Wilson said dryly. "Well, I think you'll both do nicely together. She's got the sense you need, and you've got the stability she deserves after her hardships." Before Clayton could respond, Dahlia returned with the flowers arranged in a simple glass vase. Mrs. Wilson excused herself to prepare dinner, leaving them alone in the parlor. "How was your first day of school?" Clayton asked as they sat together on the small sofa. "Wonderful," Dahlia replied enthusiastically. "The children are eager to learn, even the older boys who pretended indifference at first. And Lucas's nephews are absolute delights, bright, curious, and only mildly mischievous." "The whole town is grateful to have you," Clayton said sincerely, "though not as grateful as I am." Dahlia smiled, taking his hand. "I've missed Diamond A and you. The house here is lovely, but—" "But what?" "It doesn't feel like home the way your ranch already does," she admitted softly. Clayton's heart swelled at her words. "It's your home too, whenever you want it to be." Their courtship progressed steadily over the following weeks. Clayton attended school functions and called at Mrs. Wilson's home several times a week. Dahlia spent Sundays at Diamond A, often staying for dinner before Clayton escorted her back to town in the evening. The townsfolk quickly accepted them as a couple, and the initial gossip died down as Dahlia proved herself an exceptional teacher who took her responsibilities seriously. Even the most conservative members of the community had to admit that the pair conducted themselves with propriety. 1 month after Dahlia's arrival in Cimarron, Bartholomew Jenkins and his delegation returned from Denver with good news. They had managed to convince the bank's board to rescind the early loan repayment demands, saving several ranches from potential foreclosure. A celebration was held at the Silver Dollar Saloon, with the entire town turning out to honor the delegation's success. Clayton escorted Dahlia to the event, proud to have her on his arm as they mingled with friends and neighbors. "You look beautiful tonight," he murmured as they stood near the punch bowl. Dahlia wore a forest green dress that complemented her auburn hair and fair complexion. Mrs. Holloway had helped her style her hair in an elegant updo for the occasion. "Thank you," Dahlia replied with a smile. "Mrs. Holloway insisted I needed something special for the celebration. I think she may have exaggerated my measurements to make the waist more flattering." Clayton laughed. "Mrs. Holloway is determined to see us married before the year is out, I believe." "Is she?" Dahlia's eyes held a question. "And what do you believe, Clayton?" Before he could answer, they were interrupted by Bartholomew Jenkins, flushed with success and whiskey. "There's the man of the hour," Bartholomew boomed, clapping Clayton on the shoulder. "Your strategy worked like a charm, Clayton." "Harrington was all business until we showed him the community impact assessment you suggested." "I'm glad it helped," Clayton replied, "though you deserve the credit for the successful negotiation." "Nonsense, it was a team effort," Bartholomew insisted before turning his attention to Dahlia. "And Miss Sinclair, the children can't stop talking about their new teacher. My youngest says you're making mathematics interesting, which I consider nothing short of miraculous." "Your daughter has a natural aptitude for numbers," Dahlia said warmly. "She'll be managing your ranch accounts before you know it." Bartholomew chuckled. "Heaven help us all." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "So when can we expect an announcement from you two?" Clayton felt Dahlia stiffen slightly beside him. "Bart, you're getting ahead of yourself," he warned his friend. "Am I?" Bartholomew raised an eyebrow. "The whole town's been placing bets on when you'll propose. Most think you're being overly cautious, but I told them Clayton Abernathy never rushes into anything important." "Perhaps you should focus on enjoying your victory tonight rather than speculation about our private affairs," Dahlia suggested gently but firmly. Bartholomew had the grace to look abashed. Of course, my apologies, Miss Sinclair, the whiskey makes me forward." He tipped his hat and moved on to join another group. An uncomfortable silence fell between Clayton and Dahlia. Finally, Clayton spoke. "I apologize for Bart. He means well, but subtlety isn't his strong suit." "There's no need to apologize," Dahlia assured him. "It's natural for people to wonder, given how quickly our relationship has developed." Clayton took her hand, drawing her toward a quieter corner of the room. "Their speculation doesn't matter. What matters is what we want and when we want it." Dahlia studied his face. "And what do you want, Clayton?" "You," he said simply. "A life together at Diamond A, children running through the house, learning to ride on gentle ponies, building a legacy together." Dahlia's eyes filled with emotion. "That sounds wonderful." "But I want it when we're both ready," Clayton continued. "Not because the town expects it or because Mrs. Holloway is dropping hints or because Bart Jenkins has money riding on it." "I appreciate that," Dahlia said softly, "though I wonder, yes, how will we know when the time is right?" Clayton smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. "I believe we'll both know. For now, I'm content to court the most remarkable woman I've ever met and see where our hearts lead us." The celebration continued around them, but they remained in their quiet corner, talking of simple things: the progress of her students, the new calves at the ranch, the book they were reading together in the evenings. Yet beneath their casual conversation ran a current of deeper understanding, of futures aligning. 2 weeks later, Clayton rode out to the north pasture to check on a section of fence that had been reported damaged. The October air was crisp, with the first hint of winter in the wind that swept down from the mountains. As he finished securing the last post, a rider approached from the direction of town. Clayton recognized Lucas's nephew, 12-year-old Tobias, urging his pony forward with unusual haste. "Mr. Abernathy," the boy called as he drew near. "Miss Sinclair sent me to find you. There's trouble in town." Clayton's heart lurched. "What kind of trouble? Is Miss Sinclair all right?" "Yes, sir, she's fine," Tobias assured him, "but there's men at the school, bad men. Sheriff Wilson's out of town tracking those rustlers, and his deputies laid up with a broken leg." "What men? What do they want?" Clayton demanded, already mounting his horse. "Don't rightly know, sir. They came asking for someone named William Sinclair. Miss Sinclair told us children to leave and sent me to fetch you." "William Sinclair was her late husband," Clayton muttered, a cold dread settling in his stomach. "How many men?" "3, sir, mean-looking fellows, had guns." "Ride to the ranch," Clayton instructed the boy. "Tell Lucas what's happening and have him gather the men. Then stay there until someone comes for you." "Yes, sir," Tobias nodded, wheeling his pony around. Clayton spurred his horse toward town, pushing the animal harder than he normally would. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Why would anyone be looking for Dahlia's dead husband? And why would they come armed? As he approached Cimarron, Clayton slowed his horse to a walk, not wanting to announce his arrival. The town seemed unnaturally quiet as he tied his mount behind the general store and made his way cautiously toward the schoolhouse. Through the schoolroom window, he could see 3 men inside with Dahlia. One, a tall man with a scarred face, appeared to be doing most of the talking. Dahlia stood behind her desk, her posture rigid but her expression composed. Clayton moved closer, positioning himself beneath the open window where he could hear the conversation. "Don't understand what you want from me," Dahlia was saying, her voice steady despite the situation. "As I've told you repeatedly, my husband died 3 years ago in Boston." "That's a convenient story, Mrs. Sinclair," the scarred man replied, his voice carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. "But William Sinclair was seen in Denver just 6 months ago, very much alive and in possession of $50,000 that belongs to my employer." "That's impossible," Dahlia insisted. "I identified William's body myself. There was a funeral. I have a death certificate." "Bodies can be misidentified. Papers can be forged, especially when someone's planning to disappear with stolen money." "I don't know what my husband may have done before his death," Dahlia said carefully, "but I assure you he is dead and I know nothing about any money." The scarred man moved closer to Dahlia's desk. "Mr. Harrington doesn't believe in coincidences, Mrs. Sinclair. William steals from the bank, disappears, and then his widow turns up in the same territory. We think you know exactly where he is and where the money is hidden." Clayton's blood ran cold at the mention of Harrington, the same man who headed the bank board in Denver. The pieces were beginning to fit together. If William Sinclair had stolen from Harrington's bank before faking his death, it would explain why these men were pursuing Dahlia. "Search my room at Mrs. Wilson's house if you don't believe me," Dahlia offered. "You'll find nothing to connect me to any theft or deception." "We already have," the scarred man informed her with a cruel smile. "Found some interesting letters in a hidden compartment of your trunk." Letters from William dated well after his supposed death. Dahlia's composure faltered for the first time. "What? That's not possible. I have no such letters." "Then how do you explain these?" The man pulled several folded papers from his coat pocket. "Addressed to you at your parents' home in Boston, dated throughout last year. Seems William was planning for you to join him once things cooled down." Clayton could see Dahlia's genuine shock from his position beneath the window. She reached for the letters with a trembling hand. "These are forgeries," she whispered as she scanned the pages. "This isn't William's handwriting. Anyone who knew him would see that immediately." "A desperate claim from a desperate woman," the scarred man sneered, snatching the letters back. "Mr. Harrington suggested you might need persuasion to cooperate. Perhaps a few days in our company will loosen your tongue about William's whereabouts." One of the other men moved toward Dahlia, producing a length of rope from his coat. "Tie her hands." "We'll take her to the cabin at Murphy's Creek." Clayton had heard enough. Drawing his revolver, he moved to the schoolhouse door and kicked it open, gun raised. "Step away from her," he commanded, his voice cold with controlled fury. The 3 men whirled at his entrance. The scarred leader recovered quickly, his hand moving toward his holster. "This doesn't concern you, Cowboy. Walk away while you can." "Anything that concerns Miss Sinclair concerns me," Clayton replied, his aim unwavering. "Put your hands where I can see them, all of you." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "Your outnumbered friend." "Am I?" Clayton raised his voice slightly. "Lucas, you boys in position." There was no response. As Clayton had expected, Lucas and his men weren't due to arrive for some time yet, but the bluff caused the three intruders to glance nervously toward the windows. In that moment of distraction, Dahlia moved with surprising speed, pulling a small derringer from her desk drawer and aiming it at the nearest assailant. "I believe the odds have evened somewhat, gentlemen." Clayton felt a surge of pride at her quick thinking. "Now, all of you, weapons on the floor, slowly." The scarred leader hesitated, clearly weighing his options. "You're making a mistake. Harrington will have your ranch, your cattle, everything you own if you interfere in bank business." "Bank business doesn't include threatening innocent women," Clayton retorted. "Weapons down, now." For a tense moment, it seemed the man might risk a shootout. Then, with a curse, he removed his gun and dropped it. His companions followed suit. "Dahlia, come toward me," Clayton directed, keeping his revolver trained on the men. She circled wide around the desk, derringer still aimed steadily, and moved to Clayton's side. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, not taking his eyes off the intruders. "Yes," she whispered, though rather confused. The sound of approaching horses interrupted whatever Clayton might have said next. Lucas and 4 ranch hands rode up to the schoolhouse, rifles ready. "Perfect timing," Clayton called out. "Gentlemen, please escort these men to the jail. When Sheriff Wilson returns, they can explain why they were threatening our schoolteacher." As Lucas and the others secured the prisoners, Clayton finally lowered his gun and turned to Dahlia. Her face was pale, but her hands had stopped trembling. "How did you know I needed help?" she asked. "Tobias found me at the North Pasture," Clayton explained. "Smart boy, said you sent him." "I did. When they first arrived asking questions, I had a feeling their intentions weren't honorable." Dahlia glanced at the letters still clutched in the scarred man's hand. "Clayton, I swear to you I knew nothing about this. William is dead. I identified his body myself after the factory accident." "I believe you," Clayton assured her, guiding her to sit at one of the student desks. "But we need to understand what's happening. If someone is impersonating your husband and stealing money, it would explain why these men are so convinced he's alive," Dahlia finished. "But who would do such a thing? And why involve me after all this time?" The scarred man, being led out by Lucas, paused in the doorway. "You think this is over because you've caught us? Harrington won't stop until he gets his money back. He has resources you can't imagine." "Get him out of here," Clayton ordered Lucas, who roughly pushed the man outside. Alone with Dahlia, Clayton knelt beside her chair. "We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise, but first I want to get you somewhere safe. Diamond has plenty of men to keep watch if these fellows have friends." Dahlia nodded, looking suddenly exhausted. "I should leave Cimarron. These men followed me here, put my students at risk. The town doesn't need this trouble." "You're not going anywhere," Clayton said firmly, taking her hands in his. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together. I won't let them drive you away from the home and the people you've come to love." Tears welled in Dahlia's eyes. "Oh, Clayton. What did I do to deserve you?" "I ask myself the same question about you every day," he replied with a gentle smile. "Now, let's gather your things from Mrs. Wilson's house and head to the ranch. I'll send word to the school board that classes will need to be suspended for a few days." At Diamond A, Mrs. Holloway fussed over Dahlia like a mother hen, insisting she rest while preparations were made to secure the ranch against possible intruders. Clayton set extra men on patrol and sent a rider to intercept Sheriff Wilson with news of what had transpired. That evening, with Dahlia settled in the parlor with tea and blankets despite the mild weather, Clayton finally had a chance to examine the forged letters that Lucas had confiscated from the scarred man. "They're convincing forgeries," Dahlia observed, looking over his shoulder. "The signature is close to William's, but anyone who knew his handwriting would see the differences. The way he formed his W to K was distinctive. The content suggests intimate knowledge of your life together," Clayton noted, frowning as he read passages that referred to specific memories and shared experiences. Whoever wrote these new details that a stranger wouldn't. William had a business partner in Boston, Edward Blackwell, Dahlia said slowly. They had a falling out shortly before William's death. Edward believed William had cheated him out of his share of their importing business. Could this Blackwell be impersonating William and stealing money under his name? Dahlia considered the possibility. It's not impossible. Edward was always good at imitating others. It was something of a party trick, and he knew our history well enough to fabricate these letters. But why involve you now, after 3 years? Perhaps he needed a convincing story to explain William's disappearance after the theft, Dahlia suggested. If people believed William had gone west to prepare a place for his wife to join him. It would buy time to disappear with the money, Clayton finished. And then, when you actually moved west, it seemed to confirm the story. Pure coincidence, Dahlia sighed. I chose Cimarron because the teaching position was available and it was far from Boston's memories. Clayton set the letters aside and moved to sit beside Dahlia on the sofa. When Sheriff Wilson returns, we'll explain everything. He has connections with law enforcement in Denver. We can expose Blackwell's scheme and clear your name. Will that be enough? Dahlia worried. This Harrington seems powerful and determined. Bartholomew Jenkins and the Cattlemen's Association have leverage with Harrington now after the loan negotiation, Clayton reminded her. We'll use every advantage we have. Dahlia leaned against him, the tension of the day finally catching up to her. I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to your door. Don't apologize for something beyond your control, Clayton said firmly. Besides, trouble has a way of finding me regardless. Ask anyone in Cimarron about the time I took on the Hammond brothers over water rights. His attempt at lightening the mood succeeded, drawing a small smile from Dahlia. Mrs. Holloway mentioned something about that. Said you stood your ground against 6 men with only a shotgun and pure stubbornness to defend yourself. Mrs. Holloway exaggerates. It was 5 men and I had a rifle as well as the shotgun. Dahlia laughed softly, then grew serious. What those men said today about William. It makes me question everything. What if he did fake his death? What if our entire marriage was built on lies? Clayton considered his words carefully. From everything you've told me about William, he loved you. Even if this wild theory were true, which I doubt, it doesn't change the life you shared with him. And it certainly doesn't change who you are, Dahlia. And who am I in your eyes? She asked softly. The most honest, courageous, intelligent woman I've ever known, Clayton replied without hesitation. A woman who faces challenges head-on, who creates a home wherever she goes, who inspires children and cowboys alike. Dahlia's eyes filled with tears. You see me more clearly than anyone ever has. That's because I love you, Clayton said simply. I think I've loved you since you stood up in that saloon and demanded to see the sheriff your first day in Cimarron. Oh, Clayton, Dahlia whispered, reaching up to touch his face. I love you too. So much that it terrifies me sometimes. He leaned down to kiss her gently. No need for fear. Whatever comes, we face it together. The next morning, Sheriff Wilson returned to Cimarron, bringing news that shed new light on the situation. He joined Clayton and Dahlia at Diamond for breakfast, looking tired from his hard ride but eager to share what he'd learned. Found those rustlers, he announced as Mrs. Holloway poured him coffee. They were holed up near the territorial border, but that's not the interesting part. One of them was carrying this. The sheriff placed a folded document on the table. Clayton opened it to find a bank draft for a substantial sum, signed by Edward Blackwell but made out to William Sinclair. That's Edward's signature, Dahlia confirmed, examining the draft. I'd recognize it anywhere. The rustler claims he was hired by Blackwell to cause trouble for Diamond specifically, Sheriff Wilson continued. Said Blackwell wanted to pressure Clayton into revealing Dahlia's whereabouts. Clayton frowned. So Blackwell knew Dahlia was here. And connected to me, appears so. The rustler mentioned a bankman who was feeding Blackwell information about Cimarron. Said this fellow reported when Dahlia arrived and where she was staying. Fleming, Clayton realized. The bank manager was working with Blackwell. Makes sense, the sheriff nodded. Fleming was suspiciously quick to buy that land after the early loan repayment scheme failed, must have been promised a cut of Blackwell's stolen money. But why is Blackwell so determined to find me? Dahlia wondered. If he's successfully impersonating William to steal money, what does he need me for? Insurance, perhaps, Clayton suggested. Or to complete his cover story? Or there's something else he thinks you have, Sheriff Wilson added, something valuable enough to go to these lengths. Dahlia shook her head, bewildered. I have nothing of value except my teaching credentials and some modest jewelry. William's business was failing. When he died, there was barely enough to cover my travel west after I sold our home. The sheriff took a long drink of his coffee. Well, those men I arrested aren't talking much, but they did confirm they work for Harrington. Seems Blackwell stole $50,000 from Harrington's bank in Denver using William's identity. Harrington's convinced you're in on it. That's absurd, Clayton protested. Dahlia's been here teaching children, not conspiring with thieves. I believe you, Sheriff Wilson assured them, but Harrington's a powerful man. We need solid proof that Blackwell is behind this and that Dahlia's innocent. What about the rustler who had the bank draft? Dahlia asked. Won't his testimony help? It's a start, the sheriff acknowledged. But a rustler's word against a banker's won't count for much. We need more. Clayton thought for a moment. What if we set a trap, let word spread that Dahlia has evidence that would reveal the true identity of the thief? Bait Blackwell into coming himself, Sheriff Wilson nodded slowly. It could work, but it's risky. He's already shown he's willing to use violence. I'll do it, Dahlia said firmly. If it's the only way to clear my name and stop these attacks, I'll take the risk. Not alone, you won't, Clayton insisted. We'll arrange protection men hidden throughout town, ready to act when Blackwell shows himself. The sheriff rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Could work. I have friends in the territorial marshal's office who'd be interested in a bank thief of Blackwell's caliber. Give me 2 days to get everything in place. 2 days, Clayton agreed. In the meantime, Dahlia stays here at Diamond where we can protect her. Agreed, Sheriff Wilson said, rising from the table. I'll start making arrangements, and I'll have a talk with Fleming at the bank. Even if he denies involvement, it might rattle him enough to make a mistake. After the sheriff departed, Clayton found Dahlia on the porch, staring out at the mountains with a troubled expression. Having second thoughts, he asked gently, joining her at the railing. Not about the plan, she assured him, just reflecting on how William's legacy keeps following me. Even in death or supposed death, he's still affecting my life. Clayton placed a hand over hers. After we resolve this, it will truly be over. You can move forward without these shadows from the past. Our past shapes us, but it doesn't define us, Dahlia said softly. My father used to say that. Wise man, your father. He would have liked you, Dahlia smiled. He always said I deserved someone who would see me clearly and love me completely, not just as an accessory to his ambitions. Was that how William saw you? Clayton asked carefully. Dahlia considered the question. Not at first. In the beginning, we were true partners, but toward the end, as his business struggled, he became focused on appearances, the right connections, the right address, the right wife who said the right things. And now, what do you want for yourself? A life of meaning, Dahlia replied without hesitation. Teaching children who need knowledge to build their futures. Living in a community where people support one another. Loving someone who values me for my mind and heart, not just as the potential mother of his heirs. Clayton smiled at her pointed reference to their first conversations. And if that someone hoped you might still consider becoming the mother of his heirs someday, after this business with Blackwell is resolved, of course. Dahlia turned to face him fully, her eyes bright. I would tell that someone that I can imagine no greater joy than building a family with him, not because society expects it or to secure his legacy, but because children born of love are the greatest blessing imaginable. Clayton felt his heart swell with emotion. Dahlia Sinclair, when this is over, I have a very important question to ask you. And I look forward to answering it, she replied softly, leaning up to kiss him. 2 days later, word had been carefully spread throughout Cimarron that Dahlia had returned to teaching and had mentioned possessing letters that would expose the true identity of the bank thief. Sheriff Wilson's friends from the territorial marshal's office had arrived discreetly and positioned themselves around town, dressed as ordinary citizens. Dahlia insisted on teaching as usual, though Clayton stationed 2 ranch hands near the schoolhouse for protection. The children were excited to have their teacher back, and Dahlia found comfort in the normalcy of lessons and recitations. As school ended for the day, Dahlia locked the schoolhouse and began her walk to Mrs. Wilson's house, where she was supposedly staying again. In reality, she would circle back to the sheriff's office once the street appeared clear. Clayton watched from the window of the general store, his heart in his throat as Dahlia walked alone down the street. They had argued about this part of the plan, Clayton wanting to escort her openly, Sheriff Wilson insisting that Dahlia needed to appear vulnerable to draw out Blackwell. Everything proceeded according to plan until Dahlia was halfway to Mrs. Wilson's house. A well-dressed man stepped out from between 2 buildings, directly into her path. Even from a distance, Clayton could see Dahlia's startled recognition. "Edward," she gasped, loud enough for those watching to hear, "what are you doing in Cimarron?" Edward Blackwell, a handsome man with dark hair and expensive clothes, smiled coldly. "Hello, Dahlia, it's been far too long. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I don't know what you're talking about," Dahlia replied, her voice steady despite her evident shock at seeing her husband's former partner. "Don't play innocent," Blackwell snapped. "You've been telling people you have evidence about the Denver theft, letters, I believe you said." "If I have such letters, they're well hidden," Dahlia countered. "Why would I give them to you?" "Because I'm offering you a deal," Blackwell said, lowering his voice though still audible to those watching. "Half the money for the letters and your silence. 50,000 is more than enough for 2 people to disappear and live comfortably." "You want me to run away with you?" Dahlia asked incredulously. "After you impersonated my dead husband, stole money, and sent men to threaten me," Blackwell's expression hardened. "I'm offering you a way out, Dahlia. Harrington won't stop until he recovers his money. If you don't have the evidence he fears, he'll make an example of you anyway." "Why would you care what happens to me?" "Because despite everything, I've always admired you," Blackwell admitted. "You were wasted on William. He never appreciated your intelligence, your spirit, not like I would have." Clayton felt a surge of disgust at the man's presumption. The plan called for allowing the conversation to continue until Blackwell incriminated himself fully, but seeing him so close to Dahlia tested Clayton's restraint. So this was never about the money, Dahlia realized. "You wanted revenge on William for the business dispute, and you saw a way to profit from it by stealing using his identity." "William cheated me," Blackwell snarled, his charming facade cracking. "Everything we built together he took for himself when he cut me out of the partnership. He deserved to have his name ruined, his reputation destroyed. He's dead, Edward, has been for 3 years. Your revenge is against a ghost." "Not entirely," Blackwell replied, reaching into his coat. "I still have you." Clayton moved immediately, bursting from the store as Blackwell produced a small revolver. Sheriff Wilson and the marshals emerged from their hiding places simultaneously, guns drawn. "Drop the weapon, Blackwell," Sheriff Wilson commanded. "You're surrounded." Blackwell's head whipped around, taking in the lawmen closing in from all directions. His face contorted with rage as understanding dawned. "You set me up," he hissed at Dahlia. "Drop the gun," Clayton ordered, his own revolver aimed steadily as he positioned himself beside Dahlia. For a terrible moment, it seemed Blackwell might choose violence over surrender. Then, with a bitter curse, he let the gun fall to the dirt. "Edward Blackwell, you're under arrest for bank fraud, theft, conspiracy, and attempted kidnapping," one of the marshals announced, moving forward to secure the prisoner. "You have no proof," Blackwell insisted as he was handcuffed. "We have the rustler's testimony connecting you to the attacks on Diamond A," Sheriff Wilson informed him. "We have the forged letters your men planted in Miss Sinclair's belongings. And most damning, we have your own confession about impersonating William Sinclair to steal from Harrington's bank, which you just made in front of multiple witnesses." Blackwell's face drained of color as he realized how thoroughly he had been trapped. Harrington will never believe I acted alone, he threatened desperately. He'll still come after Dahlia. Mr. Harrington is currently meeting with representatives of the Cattlemen's Association in Denver, Clayton informed him with satisfaction. By now, he's learning the true circumstances of the theft and Miss Sinclair's innocence. Your accomplice Fleming has already confessed to his role in exchange for leniency. As Blackwell was led away, still protesting, Dahlia sagged slightly against Clayton. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." "Yes," Clayton agreed, putting an arm around her shoulders. "You're free of the past at last." The townspeople who had witnessed the dramatic arrest gathered around, offering support and congratulations. Many apologized for having believed even briefly that their beloved teacher might be involved in criminal activities. "No apologies necessary," Dahlia assured them warmly. "You've all been so welcoming to me. Cimarron is my home now, and I'm grateful to be staying." That evening, with Blackwell securely locked in the jail awaiting transport to Denver for trial, Clayton and Dahlia sat together on the porch of Diamond A. The events of the day had left them both exhausted but relieved, and a peaceful silence stretched between them as they watched the stars appear. "I've been thinking," Clayton said finally. "A dangerous pastime," Dahlia teased. "Indeed," he smiled. "Particularly when my thoughts all revolve around a certain schoolteacher." "Oh, and what conclusions have you reached about this teacher?" Clayton turned to face her fully. "That I can't imagine my life without her. That Diamond has never felt like a true home until she arrived, that every moment we spend apart feels like wasted time." Dahlia's eyes softened. "Those are very definite conclusions." "I'm a decisive man when I know what I want," Clayton replied, taking her hands in his. "Dahlia Sinclair, these past weeks have been the most turbulent and the most wonderful of my life. I know it's fast by Eastern standards, but out here, we recognize what matters and hold on to it with both hands." "Clayton," Dahlia breathed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I had planned a more romantic setting for this," he continued with a self-deprecating smile. "Perhaps a ride to the West Ridge at sunset or dinner in town after the excitement died down. But I find I can't wait another day, another hour to ask you to be my wife." Reaching into his pocket, Clayton produced a small velvet box. Opening it revealed a delicate gold ring set with a sparkling diamond. "It was my mother's," he explained. "My uncle kept it safe for me all these years, saying I should give it only to a woman worthy of it. I can think of no one more worthy than you." "It's beautiful," Dahlia whispered. "Will you marry me, Dahlia?" "Not because the town expects it or because I need an heir for Diamond A, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible and want to build a life with you." Dahlia's tears spilled over. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, Clayton Abernathy. I will marry you because I love you with all my heart and can't imagine my future without you in it." Clayton slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that spoke of promises and dreams and a lifetime of tomorrows. Their wedding took place 1 month later in the Cimarron church, with the entire town turning out to celebrate. Mrs. Holloway, beaming with satisfaction, had created a wedding dress for Dahlia that rivaled anything from Eastern boutiques. Bartholomew Jenkins served as Clayton's best man, while Sheriff Wilson proudly escorted Dahlia down the aisle in place of her father. News had arrived from Denver that Edward Blackwell had been convicted on all charges and would spend many years in prison. More importantly, Harrington had publicly acknowledged Dahlia's innocence and offered a formal apology for the actions of his men. The schoolhouse closed for a week in honor of the teacher's honeymoon, which was spent not on a grand trip but at Diamond A, with only a few days at a lovely hotel in Santa Fe as concession to tradition. Dahlia insisted she needed no elaborate journey, she was already exactly where she wanted to be. 1 year later, Clayton stood on the porch of Diamond A, watching as Dahlia walked slowly from the garden, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. Pregnancy suited her, bringing a new radiance to her already beautiful face. "Should you be working in the garden in your condition?" He called, unable to keep the concern from his voice. Dahlia laughed, a sound that never failed to warm his heart. I'm expecting a baby, Clayton, not suffering from a terminal illness. Besides, Mrs. Holloway is watching me like a hawk. I couldn't overexert myself if I tried. She joined him on the porch, accepting the glass of lemonade he'd prepared. The school board has finally found a replacement teacher for while I'm unable to teach, she reported. Miss Hamilton from Santa Fe. She seems very capable, though I suspect Lucas's nephews will test her patience. No more than they tested yours, Clayton reminded her with a smile, and you won them over within a week. True, Dahlia acknowledged, but I had advantages Miss Hamilton lacks, such as the ability to shoot straight and a cowboy husband with a fearsome reputation, she teased. Clayton laughed, placing a gentle hand on her belly. How's our little one today? Active, Dahlia replied, covering his hand with hers. Dr. Anderson says it won't be much longer now. Boy or girl, it doesn't matter to me, Clayton said sincerely. Though Bartholomew insists it will be a boy, if only because he bet heavily on it at the saloon. Either way, this child will be loved, Dahlia said softly, and taught that their value lies not in what they inherit, but in what they build with their own hands and heart. Just like their mother taught me, Clayton agreed, drawing her close. As the sun set over Diamond A, casting long shadows across the land they both loved, Clayton reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that first meeting in the sheriff's office to the adventures and dangers they'd faced together, every step had led to this moment of perfect contentment. The people of Cimarron had been right about one thing: he had needed an heir for all he had built. But they had been wrong about what mattered most. In the end, Clayton hadn't married to secure his legacy or to please the expectations of others. He had married because he found in Dahlia a partner, a friend, and a love he hadn't known was possible. What are you thinking about? Dahlia asked, noticing his contemplative mood. Clayton smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. About how they said I needed an heir, but all I really needed was you. Dahlia's eyes filled with happy tears as she turned in his arms to face him. And I needed you more than I ever realized until I found you. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they stood together on the porch of the home they shared, looking out at the land that would nurture their growing family for generations to come. The legacy of Diamond would continue, not because of duty or obligation, but because of love, the greatest inheritance they could possibly leave their children. 2 months later, in the master bedroom of Diamond, a ranch, Dahlia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Clayton paced the hallway throughout her labor, alternately praying and making bargains with God, until Mrs. Holloway finally emerged with a broad smile to announce he had a son. When Clayton entered the bedroom, the sight of Dahlia propped against pillows, cradling their newborn, stole his breath away. Her hair was damp with perspiration, her face tired but radiant as she looked up at him. "Come meet your son," she invited softly. Clayton approached the bed with reverence, sitting carefully beside his wife and peering at the tiny face nestled against her chest. The baby had a shock of dark hair and Clayton's strong chin, but his eyes, when they briefly opened, were all Dahlia's. "He's perfect," Clayton whispered, reaching out to touch a tiny hand that immediately wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. "Just like his mother." "What shall we call him?" Dahlia asked. "We never did settle on a name," Clayton considered for a moment. "What about William, after your father?" Dahlia's eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure, given everything that happened?" "Your first husband doesn't own the name," Clayton said gently, "and from everything you've told me, your father was a man worth honoring." Tears of gratitude shimmered in Dahlia's eyes. "William Clayton Abernathy," she pronounced, "a strong name for a boy who will grow into a strong man. With you as his mother, how could he be anything else?" Clayton smiled, leaning down to kiss her tenderly. As young William grew, so too did Diamond, a ranch. Clayton expanded his holdings, adding prime grazing land to the north and establishing one of the most successful breeding programs in the territory. Dahlia returned to teaching after William's first birthday, with Mrs. Holloway happily caring for the baby during school hours. 3 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah Elizabeth, named for both their mothers. The family was complete, their home filled with laughter and love and occasional chaos as the children grew. William inherited his father's head for business and his mother's love of learning, devouring books as quickly as he mastered riding and roping. Sarah proved to be fearless and determined, insisting on following her brother everywhere and showing an intuitive understanding of animals that surpassed even Clayton's. On the eve of their 10th wedding anniversary, Clayton and Dahlia stood on the porch of Diamond A, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. William, now 8, was explaining something to 5-year-old Sarah with earnest gestures, while she listened with uncharacteristic patience. "What do you suppose he's telling her?" Clayton asked, his arm around Dahlia's waist. Knowing William, probably the scientific explanation for why fireflies glow, Dahlia replied with a fond smile. "He's been reading that natural history book your uncle sent from Denver. And knowing Sarah, she's humoring him while planning to catch twice as many as he does." They laughed together, comfortable in the shared understanding that came from a decade of partnership. "Are you happy, Dahlia?" Clayton asked, the question holding echoes of conversations past. "Profoundly," she answered without hesitation. "Are you?" "More than I ever imagined possible," he assured her, turning to face her fully. "Thank you for making Diamond a true home. Thank you for seeing in me more than a schoolteacher or a potential mother for your heirs," Dahlia replied softly, "for loving me completely." "Always," Clayton promised, sealing the word with a kiss as sweet and tender as their first. As darkness fell over Cimarron, New Mexico territory, the lights of Diamond, a ranch, glowed warm and inviting. A beacon of the life Clayton and Dahlia had built together not because of expectations or obligations, but because they had found in each other the missing piece that made everything complete.